Full spectrum humans, the formation of chakras as it relates to the formation of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. This over here is the Flying Rainbow Lasagna shape. And in order to understand the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, it is important to understand the shape of the chakras as they exist before they are turned into the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. So I'm starting off here with two different depictions of the chakras. And remember, these are two-dimensional static representations of objects which are three-dimensional energy objects that are moving in time. So you could consider this to be a flattened snapshot of something that's like a whirling tornado. The way that these chakras, or spinning wheels of energy, are formed is by starting with a basic sphere of energy. And that sphere of energy is also rotating like this. And as that rotating, spinning ball of energy begins to rotate like this, we then add another dimension. And what we do is we start it spinning around in this direction, so that now you're going to see an overlap of all of these balls going around and around and around and around and around. And that gives you this. You could imagine here's the ball in position A, here's the ball in position B, and all of the rings that follow that around. And that creates this. I'll switch colors so you can see it a little better. This lovely donut formation. Okay, this is a toroid donut. So we could imagine this area over here as the donut hole, and this area around the edge is the cake. Now I want to draw this in a vertical orientation because I find it easier, according to the program of visual perception, which has been developed by living in the third dimension, to think of these as wheels, like tires on a car. So here's one tire on a car, here's the other tire on the car, and these chakras, this is almost like wheels with axles, are rolling forward like this and moving down, we could imagine, in this direction. But as you can see, these chakras are shaped like this. So we have not one donut hole, but two donut holes. One is oriented like this, and one is oriented like this. So the next question is, where does the second one come from? Well, the answer is, again, we add another dimension. So we have gone from a sphere, just rotating, to a sphere going around like this. That added that dimension and created this shape. And now we take this shape and we add another dimension. So not only are you rolling forward like tires, but you begin to spin around end over end in this direction. And when this begins to spin around in this direction like this, and remember that this is made from being a whole circle right here. What we've done is cut that off because I can tell you that this part becomes the implied portion of the next toroid donut that is next to it. But remember that this is a whole circle here. It is being implied as a whole circle. Well, this one little molecule right here and this one little molecule right here, that is where the circle is bisected, as they begin to spin around and around, end over end, they create the other set of vortexes that completes this chakra shape. So I am really stressing the importance of understanding this shape right here. This is different than the flower of life, which is built as a six-petaled shape, which very roughly goes something like this. Now, the flower of life is absolutely key sacred geometry, and that is at the basis of all of the natural world, the physical existence, water crystals, carbon crystals, everything as it is expressed in the physical reality. However, this shape right here, this is the shape of non-physical energy. And this is simply an established shape, not something that I made up. It is like when you observe something that exists. Same thing as the color proportions that exist over here. These light proportions have everything to do with the wavelengths of light as it exists in sunlight. So this is all about putting together patterns of energy as they exist. It is a language, and I'm trying to weave together the rules and syntax for that language. It is the universal language of color, shape, line, form, and movement. Because I have said before that I think it is very important. Let's no longer call this geometry. Geometry from the word for geo, measuring the earth. Let's instead call this the universal language of color, shape, form, and line, because it is an interdimensional language. It's a language that can be understood by beings that come from many different systems of perception and a common language through which we can communicate. So these shapes are not just standing there existing. They are being created by movement, and they are themselves moving. So we were talking before about this as a tires or wheels, and that this as a wheel and axle apparatus. You can imagine it moving forward on a timeline, rolling forward like this, right? Forward, forward, forward. But this rolling apparatus could really only go forward in one direction and never turn and never do anything interesting, unless you add that implied chakra. And as soon as you add this up top, you could imagine this as being like the helicopter blades, that as this red formation begins to turn like this, all of a sudden the car that was going in this direction can turn and now start traveling in this direction. So this adds a whole new dimension of movement and freedom. So now let's take it up to the Flying Rainbow Lasagne, because that is adding another dimension and adds a whole new degree of freedom. When I talk about adding a degree of freedom, what am I talking about? Let's use the example of an ant walking on a piece of paper. So let's say here's the piece of paper and here's the little ant. Oh, and the piece of paper is like this, right? If the little ant wanted to get from over here to over here, traditionally it would have to walk all the way across. If an ant were in a race with another ant, it would have to beat it by being faster by going all the way across like this. If this ant over here turned into super ant and all of a sudden could fly, this ant would gain the third dimension and would be able to go directly over to here without having to go through the intervening moment by moment linear expression. And so this red ant would gain an extra degree of freedom and would allow it to move in a more expanded fashion than the little black ant that was stuck in the two-dimensional plane. Well, so too is it with humanity, or those who experience the expression of chakras on their body. When this chakra assembly gains a new dimension. So what do I mean by that? I mean that not only is it rolling forward, not only is it spinning end over end, and not only is it whirling according to the helicopter propellers that are spinning it around, but we now also take, let me look for a nice bright color, we also take this point right here, this yellow dot, which actually is a violet colored dot, and it is actually located right there at the center of the head, and according to this stacking on the left, right there up at the top, and that is the singularity, or the infinity point, or the place of oneness where everything comes together. On the non-physical human anatomy, it is the crown chakra, the place where one connects to above. It is the connection to the source of all energy and the higher organizational principle of the universe. But over here, we have depicted it in yellow so that you can see it better. And when we take that yellow point and we begin to move it back and forth in space, or you could think of it as moving up and down in space, or you could think of it as staying in one place while the universe vibrates back and forth around it. This is adding another dimension, and so a person with these chakra assemblies on their body would gain an added degree of freedom. And this is all about traveling along these timelines, right? Where if you can imagine, your timeline is just like an ant crawling across that piece of paper, and if all of a sudden you gained another degree of freedom, you could hop up off the piece of paper and would no longer be stuck moment by moment, traveling in a linear fashion to get over here. You could be like the little red ant that goes directly to over here. So we're talking about changing your perception of time, changing your perception of the external world. And I have used this as an example before, that if I draw this shape for you over here, it can be interpreted as a flat hexagon, but if I add exactly the right lines, you can interpret it as a cube. Same exact shape, no difference in shape. The difference is in your perception and the way you are reading it and interpreting it according to your perception. So in viewing external reality and adding these degrees of freedom, it has everything to do with changing your perception of the world that you see around you. You add that extra degree of freedom with your mind in order to Flying Rainbow Lasagna, this shape right over here. So as always, it's such a big topic. I didn't even get a chance to show you these other paintings that I wanted to include, where this shows the non-physical energy anatomy of a human right here with the toroid donut, this donut shape around like this, and how that is formed in a matrix with other humans who have toroid donut energy systems around them. And this forms a whole flying, let's call it a flotilla, of energy shapes with humans at their center points floating within an abstract matrix, this sea of energy that is organized as per the higher intelligence of the universe into the universal language of color, shape, and form. So join me again on more lessons for full spectrum humans.